Come for our second session. So in our second session here, we are going to look at the causes or reasons for armed struggle in Mozambique. So we find that Mozambique had reasons for using various means of acquiring independence. So we want to look at the first reason is that the nature of Portuguese colonialists considered their colonies as overseas provinces of Portugal, where they could obtain raw materials and market. So you find that the nature of Portuguese colonies, this means that the Portuguese took their colonies as provinces, that the colonies were provinces of Portugal, and therefore, because of this, they aimed at exploiting African resources. They aimed at exploiting raw materials and transporting them to their home industries or to their home countries abroad. And this, they would then produce already manufactured products which they would bring back to Africa, to their colonies in Africa, since there was available market in those African colonies. So you find that this is one of the reasons that made the African nationalists, especially in Mozambique, to react against the Portuguese rule in Mozambique, because they realized that the colonial government in Mozambique was exploiting African resources in terms of minerals and taking them abroad to benefit their own economy and to benefit their home industries, and this, they would produce low quality goods back to African colonies, especially back to Mozambique. So this they disputed. So, and the second reason why there was armed struggle as a means of decolonization in Mozambique was that there was assassination of nationalist leaders. So you find that nationalist leaders who were aggressive and who were at the front of seeking independence and wanting Mozambique to be granted independence, they were eliminated. So you find that you find that somebody like Mondlane, Edward Mondlane, was assassinated, was killed because of political reasons, because he was giving pressure to the colonial government, the Portuguese colonial government in Mozambique, to decolonize. So because of that, they felt they needed to eliminate him in order for Portuguese colonial rule to continue in Mozambique as one of their colonies. So you find that because of this reason, therefore, the African nationalists were not happy with the colonial government in Mozambique, and because of this, they resorted to using armed struggle as a means of letting them grant independence. So also, the third point is that also there was banning of political parties. So when we talk about banning of political parties, we mean that these political parties were declared illegal and therefore were not supposed to operate. They are not supposed to operate in Mozambique. And this is the reason we find that most of those political parties were formed outside Mozambique, and therefore they were formed in some of these African countries. For instance, we had Frelimo being formed in Dar es Salaam, and also UNAMO also being formed in Kenya. So we find that, therefore, this banning of political parties in the colonies because of this, the nationalist leaders in Mozambique, they decided to have their centers in other African nations, as I've stated, whereby we have Frelimo having her centers or its centers in Tanganyika, in Dar es Salaam, and UNAMO having its centers in Kenya. And then, so this is one of the reasons also they use armed struggle, they use force in order to make the colonialists grant independence. Then you find that also the fourth point is that there was denial of basic social services, example, education, and also health services. So you find that in Portuguese, we find that in Mozambique, then the Portuguese did not they did not aim at granting education to the Africans in Mozambique, and because of this, these African nationalists in Mozambique wanted to fight for their rights, and therefore one of the rights they wanted Africans in Mozambique to be educated, because since the rate of illiteracy was very high, up to 80% of those people, of the Mozambicans, were not educated. So we find that this was one of the reasons they wanted they used force as a means of decolonizing and seeking freedom from the colonial rule, which they felt was really dictatorial. So we move on. That by 1965, only 4 students out of 32 were admitted in the university in Mozambique. So this was very high risk. This was too much to find that most of these people of Mozambique were not educated, and education was the key to them being able to get leaders who would lead them towards independence, and also leaders of different political parties. So they fought for this, and so therefore we find that seeking social services was one of the main reasons why they decided to use force in order to let the colonialists grant independence. So, and then at this point we realize that the settlers' policy of land alienation. So we talk about settlers' policy of land alienation. This is whereby the white settlers, the Portuguese in Mozambique, grabbed land due to the land policies that they created. They took away the African land in Mozambique and gave this land, most of it, to the white settlers there, and also to the companies. So because of that, find that most of the Mozambicans remained landless and they were miserable. Most of them were pushed to the reserves, and those reserve areas were congested, and therefore some of them even became sick because of such congestions and poor. So we find because of those colonial exploitation, especially land alienation, then in losing land, they had lost livelihood, they had lost source of life. Therefore, they needed to use force in order to regain back their land, which had been alienated by the colonialists. So then find that also the 6th point is that they were deprived of their rights, e.g., so they were deprived of their rights. For example, they were deprived freedom of speech and even press. That the colonialists, the Portuguese in Mozambique, did not want the African nationalists to voice out their grievances and their complaints, the complaints of the Africans in Mozambique, and they need to be given their rights. So they were not supposed to talk about their suffering under the Portuguese colonial government in Mozambique. So because of this, find that most of the African nationalists therefore were being arrested, and some of them left Mozambique and went to other African countries. So that's where they went to exile. So we find that also there was also freedom of press was also denied, that they were not allowed to write magazines and activities of the nationalistic movement and how they were planning to acquire independence. So with this, therefore, they felt they were kind of really pressed down. They were not given freedom totally, and therefore they had to use force, because now if they were not able to be listened to, they had only now to use rebellious means of acquiring their freedom from the colonial rule. Then, so the 7th point is that there was also dictatorship of Salazar. Salazar was a dictator and was one of the European colonialists. So in Mozambique, so he believed that Salazar believed that the Portuguese had an everlasting civilizing mission, that the Portuguese were supposed to civilize Africans who were in Mozambique, who were barbaric Africans, who were backward people, who were primitive, and therefore they had no reason to leave those African colonies, to leave Mozambique, because they had not finished their mission of civilizing Africans in Mozambique. So for this reason, therefore, the Africans now had to use force, because these people were not ready to leave. The colonial government and white settlers from Mozambique were not ready to grant independence, and therefore find that the African nationalists in Mozambique had the reason to use violence, means use armed struggle in order to acquire freedom for their own people in Mozambique. And then we find that Mozambique received her independence in 1975 as a result of the enduring endurance of the African nationalists who worked tirelessly and even suffered to ensure that Mozambique acquired independence. So thank you so much, and we meet next time. So next time we are going to look at still armed struggle in Zimbabwe. Have a good day.